Hello everyone, and welcome to this second part in my series of online coaching courses. We've decided to do a presentation on coachability. Now it's something that we as coaches have discussed a lot during this period we've been away from the pitch, and as we have been discussing it, the value and importance of coachability has just become more and more evident and clear, that we want to be attracting players to the club that have this unique trait. So what is coachability? Okay, it's a very broad term that we use when we say coachability, but it's used to determine the psychological performance of a player. So we're talked about a lot in terms of mindsets, and it's about a player having a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. So that ability to learn and that hunger to learn. It's also defined by the player's ability to be coached, and probably even more important than that, to actually seek out coaching. We know as coaches we've got a very coachable player where they're actually approaching us for the answers. In terms of emotional ability as well, a very nature of a coach's job and the learning process is for us as coaches to provide criticism and sometimes even put some pressure on players as they get to an older age, to prepare them for the pressure that will be on them when they take the field as a professional footballer. Now, this can sometimes be a quite abrasive process in kind of toughening up the emotional ability of the player. So it's important that we foster an understanding of why we criticise and why we build this pressure, and we have a player that can accept that and learn from it. A player's ability to adapt and improve as well is very rare now, that a player will play for, let's say for example, one position and play that position for the entirety of their career. A football match changes, coaches change during the course of a player's career very quickly, so a player has to be adaptable. I think the situation we're in now during lockdown has probably tested everyone's adaptability and our ability to improve, which we've actually seen a large amount of success from. Also, a coachability, it's a player that's also grateful that they've got a coach that wants to invest time in them, and that understanding that the majority of the time that these coaches are there, particularly outside the professional game, on a voluntary basis. And coaches, we don't always get things right, but our intentions to help and assist are always really at the center of everything we do, and that gratitude towards a coach goes a long way to supporting a player through their journey. Coachability is also an athlete, being a little bit vulnerable as well. So open to making mistakes is probably one of the biggest ones. We attract a lot of players that come from an environment where they've probably been the best player and not really been challenged, yet they now come into an environment where we're probably testing them to the point where they're going to make mistakes. Now, a real coachable player will respond to that in a very different way to an uncoachable player, as we'll discuss later. And like we've already come back to as well, that player that seeks learning opportunities and also continues to seek learning opportunities. I read a couple of articles recently on the likes of Ryan Giggs and David Beckham, and even at the age of sort of 35, 36 to 7, where at the real latter age of their career, they're still seeking learning. The football is changing constantly. It's getting quicker. Tactics are getting more in depth, so the players that move with the times are those that foster a lifelong learning process. Same with us, the coaches. So why is coachability important? Well, it's really important on two folds for our sport, football. So firstly, it's important as an individual, as we've already discussed, and it's also important that we foster a learning culture and a coachability culture, because the coachability of the individuals reflects in the coachability of a team. So as individuals, we're looking for players that have sustained individual improvement, as we've already discussed, so a clear career-long learning process. We're looking for that motivation of the player. So are they driving the learning process from intrinsic motivation? So are they the drivers, or are they being driven by those players that are around them? The more players, individuals you have who are self-motivated, the better team environment you're going to create. The long-term benefits, obviously, of providing this culture for the individual is they're going to learn more, they're going to learn quicker, they're going to have a mature mindset as they progress through the club and through their career. And that's because they've overcome criticism and they've learned the real successful values of hard work and the learning process. Also, creating leaders. Okay, so what we do find is those players that have followed this lifelong learning process and are coachable players ultimately end up being the leaders of teams as well. So the behavior they manifest is very contagious to those players around them, which obviously has a knock-on effect again of the culture and success at any teams. The more leaders you have in the team, the more coachable players you have in the team, there's no doubt the more successful the team's going to become, which has been written by many successful coaches and managers out there. So how does it affect the team? Again, we keep coming back to this positive team culture. So you imagine having a team of individuals that turn up to training every day. They're focused, they want to learn, they're always looking for new challenges. That's definitely where winning and success of a team and a club come from. And then we look at the team learning dynamic, which is again a coach's ability to be able to challenge the team, and instead of a team being defiant against that and defiant to change, then actually welcoming the opportunity to learn something new. For example, playing a different system. You might have played one system for a number of games, and ultimately teams are starting to wear you down and read how you play. So they may need a change in your system. So how open your team are to learning that, and also fulfilling that, again, attribute to the success and the long-term success of that team. Again, team success. How successful, no doubt, that a team is down to the sum of its individuals within it, which is why we're very unique in the way that we need to develop the coachability within our individuals to develop the coachability of a team, which in turn leads to that team success. So how does a coachable player behave? Now, I've used a perfect example here with us at Melbourne Victory in Lee Broxham, who's spent his whole career at the club, played over 310 appearances for Melbourne, and will continue over the next few weeks until his career no doubt ends at some point. He's also made 27 appearances for Australia at all levels, despite being only 5'7". Now, I've got no doubt that at some point in his career and some point as he was growing up as a footballer, comments will have been made about his size and how he may never make it as a professional footballer. Now, players can either use this to their benefit or use it to their detriment. Now, no doubt we have a footballer who ignored that, forged on, kept learning, and if you actually look at his career, you can see that the learning process of Lee had gone on throughout his career. He played in multiple positions, multiple tactical formations. He's played defensive midfield, attacking midfield, left back, right back, centre back. Now that's a player who's actually gone out and really learned different systems, have been open and realised the importance of being coachable. And of course, we talk about leadership and how he went on to, he's now captain of the club. So them traits that he has as a player are those that foster the leadership mentality. So what is about a coachable player that we look for? We look for players that are humble. They have that knowledge that nobody is really perfect. They look at everything from a team environment, where probably they have been, even though they've generally been the best players, they still put the team before themselves. They're respectful. They listen to the coaches. They show the respect to the coaches, and also show the respect to each other, and also opposition and teammates as well. Very important for us. They've got a real love of the game. You know, when they want to be trained, they turn up early, they want to be there, they're putting in that extra work, they play the game with a smile on their face, and obviously they clearly enjoy playing the game. They're keen to learn, something that keeps cropping up again and again when we talk about coachability. So they listen to what the coach says more than how a coach says something. Now, even in the way that a coach coaches, if they're coaching on a full-size pitch, we may have to say things quite loud and quite vocally. Now, a coachable player doesn't take that to heart. You know, they listen to what the coach is saying, actually, what the point that the coach is trying to make, rather than the way that they're actually saying it. They take responsibility. They have this understanding that their individual and team development is their responsibility, and the responsibility of their role within that team. They stay in control, so they stay focused. They don't let emotion affect their performance. They don't get angry, they don't get frustrated. And particularly in our academy environment, we come across some very highly competitive teams which are always looking to sort of get one over on us. And we have to be the role models. We have to set that standard and stay in control, and basically portray a image of, no, this is what professional football is all about. We have to stay in control no matter what. And there's been some great examples of that already this season within our academy group. So the coachable player also thinks long term. So they've already set long term goals and aspirations. Without these long term goals, like, players can sometimes lose sight of the reason that they're putting all these hard work. So we'll come back to it, but it's something that we really work hard with the players in actually building their long-term future and seeing where they want to be and what they want to become. They're excited by change. Okay, so they're also, coachable players are seeking a constant, ever-changing environment. They want to try new positions. They want to play in different formations. They want different tactical setups, because every time they play and a different way or in a different position, they understand they're becoming a better player. They're on their way to reaching their goals. They're obviously good, extremely good team players. Okay, so again, it's a team player is all about that player that puts themselves before puts the team before themselves, which is obviously extremely important to the success of the team. They're open to new challenges, which is again something we've talked about on a number of occasions. They're seeking them new challenges and they're open to it. They don't fear mistakes. Now, this is something that can really control a footballer, and especially a development football in the development phase, that they come into a professional environment and they're scared of making mistakes. Some coaches have no doubt in the past been guilty of fostering an environment where players are scared of making mistakes. That's certainly not what we want to encourage. We see when a player makes a mistake as an opportunity for learning. Within the academy, if we go out and one of our players, or we make mistakes that result in the opposition scoring a goal, we say that as an opportunity of something that them players are then going to learn and not make that mistake in the future. If we're not making mistakes, we're not being challenged enough. It's as simple as that. So it's definitely something that we encourage. And particularly in a training environment as well. The training environment is about learning. If we don't make mistakes, we don't learn. Again, that focus on the future with our long-term goals, and a really belief in where they're heading and where they want to get to. An inquisitive nature, one of the real big, when we know that a player is really coachable, and it's a big tick for us when we see players and players feel comfortable enough to actually approach us as coaches and ask questions, be inquisitive. Why are you doing that? Why are we playing this way? That's something that's a real asset for us. And again, that also in turn goes on to building the trust and respect for the coach. The most coachable players are the ones that have that trust with the coach and trust that the coach is there for the player's benefit. So how does an uncoachable player behave, and what traits do we look for, particularly when we're doing sort of trials and within a pre-academy environment? What are we looking for in terms of an uncoachable player? Have they got to a point where we might not be able to change their behaviour? There's quite a few players that I could have put in the middle of this frame here, but I've chosen not to, just to save face. But yes, showing a great example is the shows of anger on the pitch and frustration. They're very arrogant. They believe sort of they're better than the team, and they're more important than the team. They can be very indifferent, so not really when it comes to training. There's no care factor there, no interest in it. They don't go above and beyond, and it usually manifests in a real lazy attitude and behaviour. They're subversive, which means they kind of have this common trait to undermine the authority figures surrounding them. So, for example, the coach, and they'll they'll manifest some behaviour where they try and gather players around them to also portray the same behaviour, the same subversive behaviour. Yeah, very. It's something that I've come across quite a lot in adult football, and people say a lot about NPL footballers and why aren't they professional footballers? And when we look at all these uncoachable player traits, there's no doubt that these come up again and again and again. They take everything personally. So even though a coach might be directing some information at the entire group, they will believe that information is completely directed at them, and they'll do that consistently. They don't listen to the coach. So the coaches who are very experienced have a good ability to watch a group, and as we're watching and as we're talking, we also get that understanding of who is listening and who isn't by their body language, where they're looking, are they paying attention. Again, that undermining of the coach comes back to the subversive mentality. They're a bad team player, this will manifest when things aren't going the team's way. It's those players that you see disappearing, shrugging their shoulders. I think we may have all seen a player like this over the last sort of few seasons, even in professional football and on a professional football field. They're ungrateful for what the coach is actually trying to do. They don't believe that the coach is actually trying to help them, which is first and foremost one of our biggest motivators as coaches, is to help players improve. The poor body language is something that we recognise as coaches as a big sign of a player that's uncoachable. In terms of junior football and development football, we found that a lot of this behaviour can come back to a low self-esteem. So the players can be afraid of mistakes, so some of this anger and this frustration can appear because of that fear, which is why we try and take that fear out of our training sessions. That fear of failure, again, is something that can manifest from either the home or on the coaching field, but it's definitely something that we try and remove from the coaching field because of the behaviour it can manifest. Because of their low self-esteem, they can avoid accountability. One of the easiest ways to saying it wasn't me, it was someone else, and pointing that finger and really not taking that responsibility. And if that responsibility or ownership isn't there, how is the player going to learn? They're never wrong. Also, again, it's that defense mechanism when it comes to a low self-esteem, is that there's a defense mechanism to defend themselves rather than listen and improve. Again, coming back to that taking of criticism very, very personally. And they worry. We found that uncoachable players tend to have a body language, and you can see they're worrying before games. They're not just focused on, let's say, enjoying their football and going out and doing their job. They're already manifesting situations where things could go wrong, or things could be about them, or they could be worried about losing the game. And they're all things that we look at and we try and take out of the environment to make it easy for players to become extremely coachable players and adults. So how do we develop coachability in the academy? So the first one we do is group discussions, so asking the why questions constantly. Why are we learning this? What is the purpose? And we do this, sort of through online meetings, group discussions, Q&A sessions. Mentorship, I've already briefly discussed. We set individual goal setting plans through the mentorship. And probably the main focus of the mentorship is to put the player into the driver's seat of the journey, because we ultimately know that if it isn't the player that's driving, if it's us that's driving the player, or if it's the parent that's driving the player, ultimately the long-term success is not going to be there. So asking the important questions: what do we want to achieve, and how are we going to achieve that? Acknowledgement. Which is, it's a consistent acknowledgement of really good coachable behaviour. Now, this can be in the practice or a game. So if a player makes a mistake but doesn't let that affect him, that's positive coachable behaviour that we will reward and say, well done, look, you could have done it better, but you've not let it affect your game. Get your head up, focus on the next task. If we see players using good leadership skills within a game, so helping out their teammate, again, it's all, our coaches are very much ingrained to reward these coachable behaviours and practices, both at training, and it's that reinforcement really which validates coachability within the individual. Building trust is a big thing with us, and it's that building of trust between the players and the coaching staff. We're in this for the long term, and the most important thing we always say from this academy, that we're here to develop real successful human beings, not just footballers. So if for any reason they don't go on and be successful as a professional footballer, that being a coachable human being is going to provide them with so many positive skills to be successful in life, as a parent, and whatever they choose to do with the rest of their life. So again, the coachability culture we're trying to create, this culture of learning through mistakes. Again, we keep coming back to it, but it is so important that we allow these mistakes to happen, and we reward these mistakes with learning experiences rather than negative experience. So asking those questions: okay, why did you make, what was the mistake, what happened? The most important question for me is, what did you learn from it? What would you do differently next time? And that's there, you can see there, the mistakes happened, they've learned from it and implemented the learning into a future change of behaviour. Removing the fear factor from the process, again, something we keep coming back to. There's no fear of failure. Okay, a fear of failure will negate that attitude to go out and succeed. So we must acknowledge that the learning moments that occur from players failing. okay, and on giving the players an understanding of that process, and using this process to enable us to succeed in the future. Feedback sessions we do regularly. Now these can sometimes be coaches led, they can be player led as well. So sometimes we actually ask the players to stand up at halftime and give the halftime team talk. Which is something which is quite empowering for players. We sometimes ask the players to speak before the game, give the pre-match talk. It's something, again, which is building and fostering all these coachable and leadership skills which are going to turn them into a successful footballer. The last one is the empowerment of players. So a real player-led learning focus. So again, asking the players on their opinions of sometimes the decisions that we make as coaches. How would they have changed the tactics of the game? At one point this season, I turned around and said, okay, who's trained the best this week that they should start, and let the players have some ownership in that decision-making process. Once they have ownership, they understand the process that us as coaches are going through to pick them starting players. So which is really powerful, because it then manifests in their behaviours and creates that understanding from their side of the fence rather than just from the coaching side. Again, this coachability creates leaders in life. It builds a real successful team culture with coachability completely at its core. And I guess one of the best ways we judge this as coaches is when and we've been successful in creating this team culture, is when you start to see players rewarding each other for coachable behaviour. That's really when you've got a real successful coachable team culture. Creating good leaders. So we assign roles and responsibilities for players. We have different captains during training sessions on game days, and we put the onus on building leadership skills within players. Some players are naturally quieter than other players, so as a coach, they're more the players that I kind of seek out to answer questions when it comes to the feedback sessions. I think generally you always have some characters that are already strong leadership and portray that mentality already. So as much as we still support that, we try and give those who haven't got a voice as well, and make sure that they're building their leadership skills as well. And from experience, some of the quietest people usually have the most intelligent things to say, because they're more thinkers rather than talkers. Again, creating that learning culture. So the importance of learning. Why do we train? Why are we practicing? And how is this going to help us on game day? And the last thing is coachability. Okay, so not coachability, it's the ability of our coaches to actually recognize coachability within our players, and also ensuring our coaches are coachable. Do our coaches take criticism on board? Are they lifelong learners of the game? So the investment that we put into our coaches has a real knock-on effect to producing good role models for these players. Okay, so when we talk about the development of players, the parents' role in developing coachability is an extremely important role. Ultimately, you spend the most hours with your little people than your coaches do or your teachers do. So coachability really is a process that begins from the parent. So how can you support that coachability? Firstly, build trust. And it's building trust in between the child and the learning process, whether that be a coach or a teacher. So when your child complains that your coach has been really tough on them or shouting at them, your parental instinct is always to side with your child and defend them. In some circumstances, this might be the right behavior, but it's recognizing when the coach has actually the best interests of the child at heart. I mean, ultimately our job is to provide instruction and correction and constructive criticism. Sometimes this is really hard to take for a child, But in ultimately, at some point as a parent, you have to probably not so much side with the coach, but give the child the understanding of what the coach is there to do. They're there to criticize. They're there to correct you. Now, coaches may not always put that across in the right manner, and it may be hard for a child to take, but building that trust in between the child and the coach really creates a strong character within your young footballer. Secondly, be grateful. Again, we're coming back to the fact that most coaches really always have the best interest of your child at heart. It may not always you may not always agree with what a coach is doing. You may not always agree with the position they're playing or the fact that they didn't start. But there's the education and the experience of coaches over a long period of time. Most of the actions that we do have a reason behind it. A player may be left out of the starting 11 because of some behaviour they manifested in training on Thursday night, which you weren't aware about. This coach is trying to help your child by teaching them the correct coachable behaviour against what is really going to not help them as a future player and a future human being. So being grateful that a process and making sure the child's grateful for that process is a real important trait for them to have. Next, be respectful. It's something we're really big on at Melbourne Victory. So, emphasize to your child how important it is to be respectful towards authority figures, because as they mature and as they get older, they're going to have to show respect to bosses, team captains, different coaches they might not even have built a good relationship with. And that respect is extremely paramount and helps to start that sort of process of learning. Next, be enthusiastic. A child ultimately wants to learn and improve. There's a study that I read not too long ago that was done on a group of children about what they enjoy most about football, and everyone would kind of point towards that they think that children enjoy playing the game the most, and it wasn't. It actually came about that children enjoy learning the most. So that's that enthusiasm around growth and around learning with your child is really, really important if you want them to be lifelong learners, whether that be through football or through their working life. And lastly, be coachable yourself. We as coaches, we always have this discussion about if we're going to teach coachability, we have to be coachability. So be coachable yourself, be that role model. If children see behaviour manifested in their parent, they're likely to go and manifest that behaviour in a school or in external environments. So be coachable yourself, have them discussions with your child. Be coachable yourself in the workplace throughout your career. Help them understand the process of coachability. Don't build up resentment in your child towards the coach or the coaching process. Things aren't going right for you. You're not starting because the other player is the coach's favorite. These sort of things can really negatively affect your child. But whether rightly or wrongly, like, coaches normally have the best interest of your child at heart. You've probably seen a quote that comes around quite a lot, which is, uncoachable kids become unemployable adults, and it really is so accurate. All these traits and skills we're trying to put into the players are we have a commitment to building successful adults and building successful leaders, whether that be for Melbourne Victory, whether it be for a club in Europe or football or outside of football. So this is why we put coachability really at the centre of everything we do. And I guess sort of in closing, I'd just like to add that one of the main reason the pack is so important for us, the pre-academy, is so important is because it gives us an opportunity to work with players in an environment where we can not only build coachability but also test the coachability as well. There's been many instances that I had last year where we necessarily didn't bring a player into the main academy because they may have been portraying signs that they weren't a coachable player. Even though they may have had good ability, they did not have good coachability. So the long-term investment in that player just wasn't realistic and wasn't feasible until they learned these really important traits. Probably the last point just to make is, as a parent, one of the best questions you can ever ask after a training session or a game is 4 words: what did you learn? What did you learn from that experience? Even if it was a negative experience, what did you learn? What did you gain from it? How are you going to do that differently? How is that going to help you for the future? Okay, they're really, really strong, and the reinforcement of this over a prolonged period of time really will create a successful player, footballer, human being, boss, or parent. Okay, thanks for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I hope it's giving you a bit of an insight into what's going on sometimes in our heads as a football coach and what we're looking for. And yeah, we're welcome to any discussions surrounding this in the future. Thank you.